Welcome. This is my second video on the force feedback tuning of the game Project Cars 2, and we're gonna focus on console today. The reason for this video is that if you go and search on YouTube about the force feedback tuning topic, most of the videos that you can find on YouTube are about the PC platform. In those videos, you will normally be asked to go and download a custom force feedback profile from a website such as racedepartment.com and install on your PC to play with. Now, this works for PC, but it's completely irrelevant to the console. So if you're playing on Xbox or PlayStation platform, there's nothing you can do with the force feedback customization. And that's why I think a video like this will be useful. Now we're gonna use a systematic way to show the tuning process today, because many of the videos that I can find on YouTube, they are usually created around a specific model of the steering wheel. The video creator tells you a set parameter at the end of the video that they feel the best. The result that you get from these videos are usually inconsistent because one, force feedback is a feeling, and we all know feeling is subjective, and two, many of these videos are actually misinformed because people didn't carry out the tuning on a systematic way and didn't understand the real meaning behind the sliders and parameters in the force feedback menu. So the beginning of this video, I'm just gonna quickly cover and explain the real meaning of each parameter in Project Cars 2's settings, and then we can jump into the process of fine-tuning. So here is the controls menu in Project Cars 2. Before we go into the force feedback settings, it's very important that you calibrate your wheel first. And many people didn't do that, and that causes problems because the wheel calibration in Project Cars 2 is actually a meaningful step to the game engine to make sure that it knows the actual turning angle or turning degrees of your steering wheel, and make sure that it can do a 1-to-1 degree mapping in the game. For example, if you are driving a go-kart in Project Cars 2 and you don't calibrate your wheel, what happens is in the game the go-karts are of 90-degree angles each direction, maximum to turn. Alright, and in order to turn the 90 degrees in the game, you're gonna need to turn the maximum degrees on your wheel, which is, if you're driving on a 900-degree steering wheel, you're gonna need to make a 1.5 round turn to make it turn 90 degrees in the game, and obviously that's not gonna be the result that you want. So it's important as a very first step to make sure you do this essential step and calibrate your wheel properly before we jump to the force feedback menu. So here is the force feedback setting interface, and we really only have 5 parameters to make adjustment. The last one, the menu spring strings, does not have an effect in game. It only affects the menu, so we can just skip it. Alright, so the 5 parameters that we can change here are flavor, gain, volume, tone, and FX. So the flavor option controls how the force feedback engine present the force feedback to your steering wheel. There are 3 options available. They are informative, immersive, and raw. You should keep it in the raw position all the time, because that position will make sure the force feedback is unchanged, unaltered, straight out of the box of the physics engine of the game, if you choose the other two options, what happens is there's some kind of self-adjusting program running in the background while you race, and the force feedback engine will try to make adjustment to the strength of the force feedback of certain kinds in the background to make sure there's no force feedback clipping happening to your steering wheel, and in that process it may accidentally reduce or even wipe out the force feedback that you are looking for. So as a general recommendation, keep it in the roll position. The next four sliders gain controls the input amplification of the force feedback, volume controls the output amplification of the force feedback, tone is the control of the wheel force feedback signals, and FX is the control of the suspension feedback signals. Alright, let's look at the first one. The gain slider controls the strength of the input signal that come from the physics engine of the game before it's amplified by the game's force feedback engine and the output to your wheel. You should always keep it at 100 unless you're driving on a wheel that is giving you too much force feedback or torque, and there's no separate menu available for the wheel itself to adjust the strength. This picture here shows the effect of the gain control basically. Alright, we've got a spike signal here, which is the force feedback that you're likely to get when you drive across the curb, and well, if you slide the gain control slider towards the left hand side, what it does is it basically scales down the feedback signal. And in general, we recommend the gain control to be kept at 100 because it doesn't only scale down the big signals, it also scales down the small signals, which sometimes could be critical for you to judge whether the car is marginally losing its grip. For example, we have got this red signal here, which is the force feedback that you're likely to get when your tire is rubbing the tarmac and trying to hint you that it start to losing its tire grip. And if you have a smaller gain, what happens is the signal gets compressed vertically and get made even smaller and less significant, and it becomes difficult to feel these feedback. And no matter what brand of force feedback wheel you own, they all have their own internal frictions that may be caused by the drive motor, caused by the pulley and the gearing, or it could be caused by just by the weight of your steering wheel itself. And if the feedback is too small, it's more than likely it just gets masked by the internal friction and you never feel it. The next parameter is volume. The volume slider controls the final output strength to your steering wheel. It works similar to gain, however there's a slight difference between them. Gain controls the input strength, which is basically the strength of the unaltered signal, and volume controls the final signal. Right. So if I use an example to describe the relationship, we can imagine we have a cassette deck. You put the cassette in there. Gain is the signal that reads out from your cassette. It's a music. You can then apply all sorts of flavor. You can apply your treble, you can apply your bass, you can apply your surround sound, you can apply your Dolby, you can apply all sort of crazy jets to it and twist the music to the tune that you like, and then volume is the final control of the loudness of the output. Alright, and similar to a cassette deck, that when you tune the volume too loud, the speakers start breaking the sound. If you tune the volume too high in the game, what happens is you end up having the output clipping. Alright, your steering wheel is gonna have a force feedback clipping. We're not gonna talk about the volume at this point of time, because for us to properly tune the force feedback, we're actually gonna need to adjust the tone first. The tone slider is the control of the tire force feedback, and it's the critical parameter to be tuned in this force feedback menu to make sure you get the real feeling. The slider is not a control of the strength, rather it's control of the balance between two kinds of force feedback that come back from the tire. In the vehicle, the tire will have two types of the feedback. They are the aligning torque and the side load. The aligning torque basically is the bounce or the jittering or the vibration that you're getting when you are making a sharp turn from the steering wheel. Alright, the side load, on the other hand, is the gripping force that reflect on the steering wheel. So it will reflect as a weight or a force that goes against your turning direction on the steering wheel to make the steering wheel going back to its center position. If you are making a not very sharp turn, the aligning torque will be minimal, right? Because the aligning torque is only going to be apparent when you are turning really sharp, and it depends on how rough the surface is as well. It's basically created because the traveling direction of the tire is different from the traveling direction of the vehicle. The tire is always going to take the lead hand and go quicker than the vehicle itself, making its direction change. Alright, so if you're making a softer turn, the aligning torque is probably not so apparent, but the side load will be the mainstream. You will get the side load as you make the turn, that you start feeling the weight on the wheel as your vehicle start making the turn, and as you turn harder and harder, the side load will increase and the weight on your steering wheel will increase till the moment that you break the tire grip on the surface, and there will be a sharp drop of the gripping force, and as a result a sharp drop of the side load on your steering wheel. That's the moment that you feel your wheel becomes really light, and you realize you lost the grip. So the tone slider controls the balance of the amplification between these two kinds of force feedback that come from the tire. If you slide the slider towards the left, which is the aligning torque, then the aligning torque gets amplified and the side load gets compressed, and vice versa. The key to tune the correct force feedback out of the Project Cars 2 is then to make a perfect balance between these two kinds of force feedback, so you can feel the tire and feel what the vehicle is telling you. So one of the biggest problem of Project Cars 2 out of the box, and this was the cause of so many complaints about its force feedback being unintuitive or not feeling true, is that the default position that came with the game, which is the position 50, sitting right in the middle of the slider, is actually not a balanced position. It has got a huge emphasis and bias towards the side load, that it emphasizes the side load so much that it causes the force feedback clipping. And on the other hand, because it's biased to the side load, the aligning torque, while it's already quite small because it's only just jittering and jumping on the road, gets further compressed and becomes so insignificant that you can't feel it, basically. All right. So if we look at the right hand side, the side load basically in the 50 position is going crazy to a very high amplification that after making a slight degree of turns, you already saturate the strength of the force feedback, and then throughout the range of the turning angles, it will be all clipping. And then once it gets to a certain degree where your tire grip is about to break, you will then have a really sharp job of the force all in a sudden from full strength to nearly nothing. All right, and then if you then try to recover the car and regain the grip, what you end up feeling is that the first second you have no grip and no force on your wheel, and the next second it's immediately going back to the full strength. All right, but when it goes back to the full strength, you have no idea how much grip it has regained. It may have regained 100%, or it may have only regained 20 or even 30%. It's all the same strength. This then becomes really difficult for anyone to drive the car properly, because there's basically all clipping and no information from the wheel and tires. And that's what we'll be trying to correct here. So our force feedback tuning will start from the tone. We will leave the volume at this point at its default value 50, and we need to make the FX to be 0 instead of 50, because when we tune the force feedback of the tone, we don't want interference from the suspension. We want to be able to focus on which force reflect on the tire and which doesn't. So to do the fine tune, we're gonna need to do a test drive on a selected vehicle and selected track and find the balance. My recommendation is to choose Mercedes-Benz 190E 2.516 DTM and the track burner. I do not recommend choosing a different vehicle because there's some sort of inconsistency between the force feedback strengths of each vehicle in Project Cars 2. So if you have a standard vehicle that aligns to my video here, it will be a great help to make sure you have a proper start point. And the reason that we choose burner is because it's extremely flat track that we wouldn't be interfered by the bounce on the track too much. So as you can see here, we are in the telemetry interface, and if your feedback is tuned correctly, what you're going to observe is at the bottom left window, when you make the turn, you can observe the jittering or the vibration of the force feedback, as well as the change of the side load feedback strength. Okay, and again in this track you can see the similar thing as well. As you make the turn, there's jittering, which represents the aligning torque, and there's increase and decrease of the side load as you turn easier or harder. See, here we go. Now, in order to make the tuning, my personal recommendation is you're gonna need to start with the tone value of maybe 2 or 3, because the game default setting is so biased towards the side load that you actually need to start with this kind of extreme number. And then once you are on 2 or 3, you will then need to drive a couple rounds repeatedly, maybe, and increase the tone value slowly till the moment that you find a good balance between the aligning torque, i.e. your road surface feel or your tire slip feel, and the side load. You don't want to be in a position which one kind of force feedback is overwhelming the other. And once you get to the point or the tone setting that you achieve the balance between these two kind of force and it makes sense to you driving on the road, that's the appropriate tone value that you should be getting to. My personal experience with a Logitech G29, G920 platform and the Fanatec DD1 direct drive wheelbase, and these two kinds of wheel spread across quite a wide price spectrum, is that the good balance value for the gear drive or the direct drive wheelbase is at a value of 12. And I've also got a few assessment criteria here for yourself to try. I think a good balance of the tone value is that you should be able to feel a proper weight of the side load, along with a good feeling of the tires slip, a good feeling of the braking force in case you're driving a non-ABS car, and a good feeling of the road surface when you're making a turn. You're not gonna feel the road surface when you're driving straight line. This is the limitation of the engine, but if you are making a turn and there's bounce on the road surface or a change of the roughness or smoothness of the road surface, you will feel the difference, and that's the good position of the tone. When it comes to the tire slip, you should be able to feel when your tire is grippy, when your tire is about to lose the grip because you feel the jittering, when your tire is partially losing its grip because the weight on the steering wheel decreases, and when your tire has lost its grip completely because you now feel the wheel has almost no weight. When it comes to the braking force, you should be able to feel at least the two things. One is if you're braking hard on an ABS car, you should be able to feel the vibration of your steering wheel when your ABS kicked in, because the imbalance between the braking force of the two front wheels. If it's a non-ABS car, you should be able to feel some really subtle but still noticeable bounce of the road surface when your brake locks up. Okay. Now, once we determine a good tone number, the next step is the determination of the FX slider. FX is a strength slider for the suspension feedback, with 0 meaning there's no feedback from the suspension, and 100 meaning it's a maximum. Alright, it basically is a slider that controls how much feedback you're gonna get from the vertical compression or vertical bounce of the suspension system. So if FX increases, you're gonna get more force feedback strengths when you are compressing your suspension, or if there's an uneven surface that causes your wheel to bounce vertically. Okay. One thing that we need to notice is that by increasing the FX, it's actually there's an effect that it diminishes the aligning force feedback that we achieve just now from the tone settings. So it's very important that we adjust this value smartly to make sure that, while we get to the maximum FX that's suitable for our feeling, and we're not losing the aligning force feedback and losing the feel of the tire grip. And again, we're gonna need to achieve the correct result of FX by test the drive in Project Cars 2. We should be finding a track that is of a collection of flat and bouncy surfaces, and that would be the best, so we can understand the real effect of FX introducing. In the same time, the track itself needs to be providing a number of tricky corners, so that we can feel when the FX kicked in, whether we're still feeling the tire groups. Okay, so the choice that I made in Project Cars 2 is the Mount Panorama, the Bathurst track, because it's got a lot of uphill and downhills and a lot of tricky corners there. So by tuning, I think we should be starting with FX of about 12 and increase it slowly until the moment that you feel the feedback of the vertical jump is the maximum or a suitable level, while you still maintain the feeling of the tire grip. In this Bathurst track, I think there are a lot of locations where it offers the opportunity to test this, and my personal experience of the FX tuning is that the good value is in between 25 to 32, and I personally prefer 32. Now, once we determine the FX, the volume is going to be the very last value to tune, and the volume itself doesn't have a strong effect on the characteristic of the force feedback. It's more or less just about whether you are clipping or not clipping, and whether you are magnifying a small detail big enough so that you can actually feel it on the wheel. It's more or less an adjustment to your liking. And remember, there's some sort of inconsistency of the feedback strengths between different vehicles in Project Cars 2. So you should be starting of the value from maybe 40 and then settle at a lowest value that is the so-called, we can call it the common denominator of all the car feedbacks there. For the cars that has a strong feedback strengths in Project Cars 2, that's the base value that it start with, and then go to the Edit Assignment tab in this controls menu and assign 2 keys to tune the volume up and down in your steering wheel. That will make sure that when you're driving a different vehicle, and if the volume or the strength on the wheel is not suitable, you don't have to always jump to the options menu and change it every game. You can actually make the adjustment on the fly to the strength that you like, and to make sure that you get the best force feedback and also the performance within the game.